Hi, Shepherd Youth. We're so glad that you have joined us in watching this video. A lot of us right now are hurting, we're confused and overwhelmed about the current state of our country and our world concerning the lives of our Black communities, our Black brothers and sisters. So we just wanted to take some time and come on here and talk about how we can navigate through some of the questions many of us are wrestling with right now as believers in Jesus. So we've got here Dusty Frizzell, our Shepherd Youth pastor, as well as Jeff Cravens, who leads our worship team, Miss Andrea Holleran, one of our most loved and appreciated volunteers, and Miss Noelani Jones, who has worked with us as an intern up until recently. So thank you guys for joining us in this discussion. We'll start off with the question, overarching question, why are we paying so much more attention to Black Lives Matters right now?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. It's always been important, but right now with social media and just things that maybe weren't so overt before, now everything is in your face. We're seeing more and more, actually seeing more and more of the incidents of injustice that are happening, and it's causing people to just speak up and say it's just not right, and we have to do something to change it.
Yes. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I would say, like Andrea said, I think there's a lot of reasons, a lot of things that have built up to this point. But it's similar to, it's just one of those things where it's a situation where it's been there for hundreds of years, and it's like it's almost like a grain of sand on the beach, and you keep dropping a grain of sand, and eventually you have a mountain of sand in front of you. And I think we as a culture are finally seeing this mountain of racial inequality and racism that's right in front of us that has been building up for hundreds of years. And now we feel like we're having to ascend this mountain, right? Like, or ascend this hill of racism. And so that's why you see a lot of this Black Lives Matter dialogue and movement happening. That's already been happening, but it's picked up all this movement because, as she just said, because of the media and how in front of us it is right now. I think if we didn't have people that are so prone to pulling out their cell phones to take a video, if officers weren't wearing chest cameras and things like that, I think we would probably still be a few steps back than where we are now. And so there's, I think in the past, I probably have been a little bit more critical on how quickly people are to pull out their cell phones instead of helping others when something's happening. But I'm actually more thankful in this season of how quickly someone pulls out a cell phone, because a lot of people know that that's probably the best thing they can do. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different variations that has called for Black Lives Matter to be so creating so much waves right now in the world. But I think we've been here for a long time as far as what's going on. I don't think it's like all of a sudden because of these recent things. I think it's just kind of built up to this point where people have had enough.
Yeah. So how can we, if we're not totally like understanding of the situation or what's going on, how can we start creating conversations with each other?
This is actually that's here. Oh, I was like, this is actually something I'm super passionate about. I think, so I'm half Black, and then I'm a quarter white and Korean. And so race discussions were always a part of our childhood, like always a part of our childhood. And so I just kind of got comfortable with that. And I've come to realize, especially during this time, so many people haven't had to go there and have those conversations. And I've had so many friends reach out to me like, okay, I don't know where to start. I don't want to come off like as a racist. Like, I just want to ask questions. And for me, I feel like the resounding thing that has not changed was that that people just want to hear your stories. And so where do we start? It's just sharing life experience and saying like, my experience is going to be completely different than yours, but this is where I'm coming from. And I feel like that's where you at least get a base ground of respect and understanding of like, wow, even though I didn't experience that, I love you and I care about you. So I have a better understanding of who you are and how you feel when you walk into rooms. And I feel like that kind of creates a space to then be more honest and ask those uncomfortable questions, but still feel loved in the process because someone's invested into hearing your story and hearing like what you're about.
Yeah, that's huge. Dusty, do you have anything about that?
Sure. I think part of, I'll speak to like what, in my opinion, concerning maybe why right now it seems like white America is a little more overall open. I mean, I know within America, there's layers, right? And lots of different corners that people entrench themselves in. But there does seem to be more willingness to look at some things different. Like I remember, when the Black Lives Matter movement really began to first gain some steam, right? And like, and it just, as I watched on social media, it got dismissed a lot by certain political persuasions, especially. And just kind of, the All Lives Matter was a quick thing, but you didn't hear as many other white voices right then try to explain, yes, of course, all lives matter. But if that were lived out all throughout the policy land and the landscape of America, if that were true, then there would never be a need to raise up a voice that Black Lives Matter. But now you're seeing that. And so I think that it's not solely a response to the horrific nature of George Floyd's killing and the fact that there were at least two other pretty famous killings just during COVID, with Breonna Taylor, with Ahmaud Arbery. I don't think it was just that. I think it was part of it, and the fact that people were home, and a lot of people were home looking at things. But I also think it's been within the subconscious of the American mind now for a while, and it's stewed, and I think more people have been willing to go to listen and do what Noelani said. If they hadn't asked questions before, white America, especially white believers, if they hadn't asked stories of their Black friends, if they hadn't read anything that maybe they'd had suggested from an African American friend about American history through the African American perspective, I think they're more willing to do that now. So that's part of why I think Black Lives Matter has become even more prevalent, and I would say accepted. The ideology, the idea. I don't know if the ideology is the right word, but the idea.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of has been, this struggle of, well, I want to say something, but I don't know what to say. So how can people, particularly students at this time who feel that way, how can they navigate through, that struggle?
I would say, as a student, if you've been around Shepherd Youth long enough, you've probably heard Dusty say this, but he always talks about how Jesus asked a lot more questions than he gave answers. And so if you're looking at who to model your decisions after, you probably should look to Jesus, which is going to sound like a cliche Jesus juke move. But really, though, I mean, asking questions is a lot safer than coming out and saying what you think you know. And I totally understand, when someone says they're scared or confused, but I think you would probably end up being a lot more scared if you look a year from now, realizing that you should have asked more questions, and you feel like you're now even more so in the dark when it comes to understanding what's going on and what's going on in the heart of a Black person that that's a friend. And that's my other thing is, I think if you're wanting to ask questions and you're wanting understanding, you need to find that in people that you trust. Don't go to some random Black person on the street and be like, hey, can I talk to you about Black Lives Matter? That's just not smart. But I think people need to know that, number one, that they're your people and that they're your family, they're your friends. And then you have that place where you can ask those questions. As Noelani said, like, being mixed is a different ballgame as well, you know? And so like, you kind of like are always in that discussion. And for me and my family, which is how things kind of went down, is my dad is from Dallas, Texas, and a black man from Dallas, Texas, and grew up in Dallas, and then came out to LA in the 70s and met a white girl, my mom. And early on, those tones of racism built up on my mom's side of the family, because it was like my dad came from another place and infiltrated the family and took my mom, right? And so what's interesting is I feel like that whole infiltration, like thought and like view, it almost like trickled down into my own life too, because it's like I have sometimes where I felt like I'm almost treated poorly, or, you know, whatever you want to say it is. Like if there's something that's held against me because of my skin, I've almost felt like there's this weird understanding that, like, because you're mixed or you're half white, it's like it's even worse in some cases, because it's like you're not only black, but you're representation of someone who's infiltrated, like in that kind of, you know, mindset. So from my experience, like I've almost had to always be comfortable having those conversations. And as a student, I think if you are someone who is not a person of color that is scared to ask the questions, like, again, I think the easy answer is just ask the questions. Like, I know that it's like, it's the same situation when a guy is like wanting to date a girl and he's like super scared to ask her out. But it's like, I always tell the guys, I'm like, dude, you're either going to just ask her right now and she's going to say no, and then you move on and you'll be fine. You'll probably cry for a day, but you move on. Or this is going to linger for 6 months and you're still going to ask questions like, maybe she likes me, maybe she doesn't. And that is painful. So it's so much better for you just to ask the question right now. So I would say if you're scared to ask a question, it's okay. Be scared and ask the question.
I also think for students, if you don't know what question to ask, all you have to ask is a really simple question for anyone. And you can have this discussion with anyone and be like, how has this been making you feel? Like, where has this taken you emotionally? And kind of, people are going to open up to you because they want someone to talk to and someone to share their heart with. And then that kind of is the domino effect of, oh man, like, tell me more of your story. Tell me more of what your parents like went through, or your grandparents. Like, everyone has stories for days. And if someone's just going to lend that ear, and I think if you just start with, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? It goes light years, guys. It really does.
Yeah. And talking to someone that you know, that was the thing that I was going to suggest, is that you start with somebody you're comfortable with, that you're, you know, safe with, that you can talk to, that you can, you know, and ask those questions, and then be honest. It's like, if you don't understand or you've never, it's like, explain that more. I don't get it. Just if you're with someone that you trust and have relationship with, it's okay to say, I don't get it, you know, or just, and ask the question and say, you know, give me more, tell me more, because I'm not understanding. But if you're with someone safe, then that makes opening up that door a lot easier.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Gosh, that's so, it's so, it just increases our awareness, you know, of how to move forward. So thank you guys for that. We are also seeing a lot of division when it comes to protesting and looting. And the difference is, you know, like black and white. So how can we explain that better to our students so that they can understand, you know, what's going on with that?
I'll jump in. Well, first I would say, like, someone asked that question on Jeff and I's last, not D group, but summer small groups. And it was really honest, and like, we're, you know, another student was able to share, and we were able to share. And so I think probably for me, this feels like it's been said a lot, but maybe you haven't heard it. Like there's first of all, clear distinction between rioting and protesting. So there's a clear distinction, but one shouldn't like wipe out the other, right? Like, because there are times where anger, and sometimes justified anger, because the anger is an emotion. What might happen from it is then an action that potentially is going to have consequences. But like, just because there is rioting doesn't mean there shouldn't be protesting. And protesting is a major part of what America was founded on. And here's the other thing, like, if you were, let's say your parents take you to a protest, to a peaceful protest, and they want to assemble with people and maybe their specific thing is they want to write, "We believe Black Lives Matter." They're standing for that. They may hear some chants, they may see some signs, they may hear some speeches that they don't 100% agree with. As a matter of fact, I would say just about anywhere you are, including church, if you agree 100% with every single thing you hear, you're probably in a cult, okay? And so it's okay to not only not understand everything or not agree, but here's the other thing that I think is true. The vast majority, this is something my son and I, my oldest son, talk about. He's 16, so he's some of y'all's age. We talk about a lot. He and I went to a protest. I can't remember if it was last week now. I can't even remember what day it is. But we went with Jeff and some other friends. And, we've been talking for quite a while about why protest and what is the good that it does. And I'll stop here. But one of the things I think that good, peaceful protest does is it accelerates some things, especially when it's not just kind of one and done. I think part of the reason the officer that killed George Floyd was charged and arrested so quickly. I mean, I do that because there's a good argument that it should have been quicker, but compared to a lot, it was somewhat quick. I think part of that reason was the outcry and the voices and the protests. Are there some things that have happened that were not what the protesters wanted in terms of looting and rioting? Absolutely. But there's things within any type of people organizing to do something that's good that could go wrong. That's called, life. So I'm already rambling, so I'm going to stop.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. As far as like when someone asks that question, I feel like the goal is not because they're trying to decide which one they want to do. Like, I want to either protest or I want to go steal some stuff. Like, I don't think that's the question that students are asking or people are asking. It's a question of understanding. And so again, I would never condone looting and rioting, but I understand it, right? Like, and I think for some people, they're looking at history, and people have said this too, but like when MLK was assassinated, they rioted for 6 days, right? And then the law was passed, but they also protested for another 300 plus days. So there's a difference there, but some people are looking at the 6 days and thinking, maybe that's more effective. Let me go riot and loot, right? And so again, if you're the person that's asking why is there looting and why is there protesting, what's the difference? They're very different, right? But also I think they come from a different thought process. And I think if anyone that is pro looting, right? My biggest pushback on that is you're looting because of the tragedy of a life lost. And I would say this, there's no department store or clothing store. If you amount every single item in that store, it doesn't come close to the value of a human life. Like, no jewelry store is going to account for the life of George Floyd. Like, it's not going to happen. And so people in their minds are like, well, something was taken from us, so let's take back. And it's like, that's not how it works. And even if you thought that is how it works, nothing you could take is going to bring that man's life back. And so again, I think if you're asking that question, as far as like why, I think if anything, it's people are hurting and they're responding the way that they think is right, and even if it's wrong. And I think we all have done that in our own lives when it comes to our own sin. Like we usually sin out of things that are going on in our heart that's wrong and that we haven't really taken care of. And so I think this is just another example of that, where people have chose, like, either you choose a path of life or a path of destruction. And I think those who are choosing the path of life, they are the ones who are peacefully protesting. And those who are trying to commit harm and they're committing crime, really, when they loot, they're choosing the path of destruction. And so, again, don't condone it, but I understand it.
So we have seen protests and riots and looting taking place as a form of action for change, but what are some other ways that we can engage in to cause change for our Black brothers and sisters? What can we do?
I know a lot goes a long way, even if it's just, I think a simple thing is getting educated. And at the same point, that's part of a conversation, reaching out to someone you trust and saying, hey, I want to learn more. And I want to understand where you're coming from better. And I think on the flip side of that, to all my Black friends, don't be shocked or offended or belittle someone's ignorance, because genuinely some people have no idea, and and this is a great place for you to learn from each other. And I think we need to welcome that a little bit and say, like, wow, I didn't, because some certain things you're just raised with an awareness about, because it's part of how you grew up and the skin tone of your body. And so you notice certain things, you know how to act certain ways that other people just necessarily don't. So I think it's just the sensitivity on both sides to that. But I think get educated, watch documentaries. There's a lot of companies now have come out with lists that they've posted of amazing content that they found, podcasts and movies and documentaries. There's the 13th on Netflix. There are so many different resources literally at your fingertips. I went on Amazon Prime today or last night, and it had a category for Black history and awareness that you could just click on and scroll through. And it was like just a litany of kind of just ways to get educated and better know people's stories, which I thought was super cool. Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing, is just to not be afraid to take that time to like learn someone else's story. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be fun. It's going to take time, but I think coming out of that, it's going to create change, because now you know how to stand in the gap for your friends. Now you know where they're coming from, and your heart might break and will break for certain things that their heart's broken for. And now you're united together in that, and you can use your platform to do that. But that's like a little two cents.
That's awesome.
I think when I think about all that's going on and the protests lately, I've been thinking about, and then what, and what happens, and how do you, what happens after the protest. And I think my prayer has been that as people are getting involved in the protests, and when I think about the students, it's like some of you, this is going to fuel you to choose a career path, and some of you, this will fuel you to get involved with maybe your local city council. But I think my prayer is that I don't want the protests to just end and things, I know they won't go back to the way they were, but my prayer is that this will engage people in a way that causes them to do something more and do something different, do something extra. I've never done a podcast before. So just doing something different that you wouldn't normally do, or use this as a flat platform to research more and find out more and engage and see, what can I do going forward? Is this a career that I want to do? Can I be somebody that helps to write laws that change things? I kind of keep looking at this a little bit further out, as when I look at the students, things I can do now, and then things that it may fuel you to do later to get engaged and make sure that going forward, we keep moving forward and not backwards.
Right.
I'll give you these 4 words from my friend Phil Allen. He's been saying this for a lot of years, that you listen, and we've talked about that for a while, to ask stories, or ask let me back up, like Noelani said, to just ask, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling during all of this? But listen, learn. And so that's that, I think, education piece. I love what I think Noelani said about like being patient, or not belittling someone for their arrogance. I spoke to a person who is older than me, and they just learned about redlining, and but they were honest about it, and they were encouraged right away that, like, it's okay. Like, I mean, and there's more, right? And then for whatever I have learned in my life, there's more. You know what I mean? Like, I'm ignorant about things that I don't know that I'm ignorant about. So learn. And then his third one, so listen, learn, lament. And really, friends, like, as you listen to stories that will be hard for your, especially if you're not a person of color, if you hear stories of discrimination and racism and injustice, profiling, if you hear stories from grown-ups telling you about when they were, especially Black men, telling you about how they were small kids when the police pulled their dad over and made them put their hands up in the air when they were little. When you hear stories like that, when you feel that thing in your gut where you're bothered, like, that's okay. And you don't have to you don't need to feel guilty. You know, like, you don't need to have like some kind of shame because you look in the mirror and you have your tone. But lament, like, cry if you need to, be angry righteously if you need to, because if you didn't know some of those stories, your eyes are opening, and once you see, you can't unsee. And so lament. And then the fourth one he gives, the L, is labor. And there's plenty to do, but I think those first 3 are where you start. I'll throw out a couple things that I've been sharing with mostly adults, but some of you might jump on some of these. Some books I'm working through right now is Slavery by Another Name, Stamped from the Beginning, and The Color of Law. I'd read some other books that friends had given me. These are the ones I'm working through now. Noelani mentioned 13th on Netflix. It's super powerful. When They See Us will help you feel something in your bones. Fruitville Station, Mudbound, you need to ask your parents' permission. And Selma is a powerful movie. There's all kinds of people you can follow. And if have this conversation with your parents, if they say, no, I don't want you to, okay, cool. But Angela Rye is a powerful female voice right now in this movement. Van Jones, Sean King is going to have some really rough stuff. But he's an important voice right now. You may not agree with everything, and that's okay. My son and I talk about some of his posts every day. Jackie Hill Perry, Miles McPherson is a phenomenal preacher, and he's got a lot of good stuff. He's written a book called The Third Option. There's some learned stuff. I'm going to mute myself now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make this quick, but I think as a student, we obviously know there's a lot of things we're talking about, having conversations and reading and learning about everything that's going on. And one of the other dialogues that's happening right now is people are talking about this idea of privilege, right? And I think as a student, whether you're a person of color or not, and I think I'll say if you're not a person of color as a student and you're trying to figure out what to do, I would start with, like, one of the things that we do when we talk about ministry at the church. It's like, well, what is this person like? What are they passionate about? Or like, what are they good at? Like, I'm a singer, so I'm a worship leader. Like, not because like I'm passionate about it, but also it's something that I feel like I'm good at. So that's what I do. And so if you're like a student athlete, right, like you're good at sports. And so my question is, maybe you can start training younger kids. And part of your training is understanding it's a level playing field, and you're teaching people that there's no it's all in the same field when you're playing that sport. Maybe you're someone who is a younger person, but you feel like you have a pretty decent social media following. Like, you could use your platform to communicate and talk about this. And so, like, again, one of my favorite videos I saw last week was from Ashton Kutcher. And I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he's a white person who used his social media platform to express how he's feeling about what's going on right now and why Black Lives Matter. And again, all I'm saying as a student for you is look at your life and look at what you're either good at or something that you feel like is a privilege for you that you have. Like, some people feel like their privilege for them is they have extra money, so they want to donate to a cause. And like, that is fine as well. But at the same time, as Desi just said, those first 3 L's, you have to focus on those as well. Like, you got to do those to benefit for you in this time. So I think as a student, I would say just look at the things that you're good at and see how you can use those things to help this movement and keep pushing it forward. And as Andrea said, like, to make sure that this doesn't stop, that we continue this conversation, that we continue this movement.
I'm so glad that you touched on that, Jeff, because I think, we're doing this video as somewhat experienced leaders. We've gone through our life and are here now as leaders at Shepherd Youth. But the fact is that these students will, if they are not already, they're going to be leaders one day, either of their family or at jobs or, anywhere. They are going to be those leaders. And just this morning, I read something from Jo Saxton, who is also, she's not African American, because I don't think she's American. She's more UK. But she says this, and it just resounded so deeply within me. And I was like, thank you, Lord, because this is all you. But she says, I wonder, are we in this for the moment, or will we be in this for the long haul when it comes to transformation, when it comes to change, and when it comes to changing the world? I think for us as leaders, when we think of our response, the answer is yes. There is a response for a moment, but I'm more interested in the response for the mile, for the marathon journey. That's because as leaders, we shape and define cultures with our words, with our values, with our behaviors, the systems we create, and we need to be thinking of all of them. And I mean, I agree. We're going to have to consistently have that in our awareness and our consciousness of what we're doing in this moment, the decision that we're making right now, how will it affect our future? How will it affect the lives of our brothers and sisters that we have an influence, over? And it's a matter of consistently seeking that out and looking to Jesus, because we don't have all the answers, but Jesus helps us and guides us and gives us wisdom, and his word, which is ultimately, what will take us from one degree of glory to the next. And as we follow him, we'll be able to connect, and we'll be able to bear each other's burdens the way that only we can with him. So if anyone else has anything that they want to leave our students with, you can go ahead, and we'll wrap this up. But
I just want to encourage these students, guys. You can change the world by loving that one person in front of you. You really can. And you might not really understand, but it's because how you love that one person could change how they grow up and their awareness and how they raise their families and how they educate their kids eventually. So know that your voice really does matter. And maybe you come from a family where you weren't aware about a lot of these situations and you're really kind of feeling that tension right now. It's okay, because now you have the freedom to know and to learn and to lament and to create change. and to go on, and you're going to live a different life, but you're going to be changed forever for the good. And now you're going to have a new sensitivity, but just know, like, your voice matters, no, every racial background. And right now we are hearing the laments of a lot of our Black brothers and sisters. And I guess don't let it stop there either, because there's going to be other minorities who are also going to have stories to tell. So to keep that conversation and that dialogue always moving, always open, and you're going to go on to just be rock stars. All of you already are, because you're here and you care and you're loving people. But just know that this is a lifelong journey, and I am praying for you guys. I'm fully convinced that you guys are going to grow up to be amazing American citizens who genuinely care about people's hearts and genuinely want to see reform and can make this change, like Joe Saxon said, via Leah, that we're in this for the mile, for the length, for the time. We're already thinking ahead to how do we create change that's lasting. But yeah, just want to encourage you guys.
Yeah. If you've been watching us this long now, which we're probably around 35 minutes or so, you clearly want to do something. You want to make a change. And so I think as a student, my encouragement is, like, don't like have a notepad out right now with like all the things that we just told you to do and say, okay, I'm gonna do all these right now. Like, just pick one. If it's one book, one conversation, one, like anything, just pick one thing and just do one thing every time. Like, don't try to do everything all at once, because it's a lot. And it really is. Like I said, I definitely love what Nolani said is the fact that if you're on the other side, just don't belittle the person that is in the dark, that is unaware of what's going on. And so my encouragement for you as a student is just pick one thing and don't be scared, and know that it's okay. And my hope that if you are a person of color, that you wouldn't belittle the person that is taking a step in faith and in being courageous to ask that question and to take that step.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for doing this. I know that it's going to bless our youth and beyond, because the internet can get, it goes beyond what we sometimes intend for it to go. So thank you so much. Youth, Shepherd Youth, we love you, and we're so glad that you're a part of this ministry. We pray that God will continue to show himself to you, surround you with his presence, with his peace and his comfort, as we move forward in racial reconciliation. We hope you have an amazing week, and we can't wait to connect again. See you later.
Love y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.